tell you a little bit about Port Arthur, and I won't keep you because I could talk all night, but I'm not. Actually, Port Arthur originally started 138 years old ago, so you're part now of a pretty long and old family. And originally, as you can imagine, in those days, it was made up of blokes who were pretty tough guys. It was the working population over there then were in shipbuilding, mines. Actually, it was a coal mine in Stockton, in case you don't know, but they were miners and so forth. In fact, the guys in those original teams, a little bit later in the Depression years, they actually built Linoval, created Linoval from saltbush with horses and stuff and bloody in their time off they actually built Linoval. So you're going to play on the thing that was built by some of the original blokes. It fluctuated for many times. It came and went, stopped during the First World War, because the whole of the Newcastle competition stopped during the First World War. In fact, I think Rugby in Australia stopped during the First World War. Anyway, then they get started again. They were one of the 7 or 8 teams that were in the Newcastle comp at the time. They've had a lot of names. They were called East, they were called Stockton Wanderers, but generally during the time, most of the time they played in the colours red, white and blue, and the symbol was seagull, which is part of the Griffins thing, in the fact that there's a bird at the head and there's a tail of Tech College, who were tigers in the back end. So they fluctuated thing. We've had at times 4 grades. Back in a long time ago when I was playing, you needed to have 4 teams. So they had a lot of blokes. You'd probably think they all came from Stockton. Certainly not. A lot of blokes turned up from town. And I often used to ask, how did he turn up here? It was simply a case of a mate had a mate. I'm sure all you blokes here are here tonight because you had a mate who said, put on a pair of boots and come give a game. So it wasn't just a Stockton thing, it was a town thing. I know there was blokes with guitar, and I actually travelled from Gormont, so that was the nature of the thing. It had junior sides, we had great junior sides, and we were really competitive in the Newcastle competition. The golden years for us was in 1960 to probably around about 70, 10 years of bloody good thing. We also had a lot of blokes come from the RAF. Coach came down from the RAF, a bloke by the name of Jackie Dennis, and he brought a lot of blokes from the RAF. And I'll tell you, they were bloody good footballers too, and took us from there to there. 67, 68, 69, they were virtually unbeatable in first grade, although we never managed to win the grand final, unfortunately. Rather broke our hearts. But in 68, I think they went through undefeated in first grade, right through to the grand final, and got beaten in the last game. And then after that, it started to fade. And the one reason why was the lack of juniors. If you don't have juniors and you're playing in the Premier competition or something like that here, you will disappear. And that was generally the case, because the older blokes just started to retire and there was no one to fill them up. But we had some great times. We made some great friends in the fact of Telligary joined the club and filled in a team as things got tougher. Nelson's Bay came down. I'm still friends with a lot of those blokes today, coached a lot of them, and they were a great bunch of guys. But they wanted to go their own way, and that's to be expected. So in the end, as you know or should know, that Techport and there was a lot of pushback from both sides. Both sides wanted to get the advantage over the other, but eventually they formed the Griffins. What I want to say to you tonight is, your history is with the Griffins. You're part of Port Arthur and you're part of Tech to a degree, but you're all the Griffins. You set your own destinies. You're going to make your own fun and so forth. That's nice where you come from, but you'll make your own destinies. You'll have your own fun, friends and so forth. So focus on the Griffins. Know where you come from. We're pretty proud that you're still going, to be honest with you. As I said, I was part of that club president and all that sort of stuff. And I thought this year, when it was fallen over, and Garth and that managed to pull you guys in from where, I don't know. what a great achievement. I wouldn't have given him a chance of doing that, to be honest with you. I really don't. But is they're all part of that legend. So asked me to talk to you, Gus, asked me to talk to you about Stewie Trench, which was the cup that you're playing for on Friday night. I don't know, does anyone know Stuart here, many? Probably none? Okay, let me tell you about Stuart. Stuart was one of those guys that was recruited to the club by a guy who was having a beer at Hamilton RSL and said to him, geez, you look like a footballer. Stuart hadn't played rugby union, but he came across to Stockton and ended up being a great front rower. He was built like a front rower. He was a great front rower. He wasn't the best front rower, but he was a great front rower. I ended up being a hooker for him, and there was another bloke, Trevor Bates. And we ended up being front row for about 10 years together, on and off. And then we also became best mates because we had a coach came in from the country, and I never experienced a coach from the country before, but you want to know who the front row was, and I don't know who your front row is, but I will part this little bit of knowledge for you, or recommendation. He said, who's the front row? And we said who we were, and he said, right, you blokes are going to drink together, you're going to eat together, you're going to go out together, you're going to take your wives out together. And we actually did that, and in the end, I've got to say, me and Stuart were the best mates until his passing some 30 years later. And I can recommend that to your front row, maybe even your second rows, do the same thing, and 5/8 thingabobs, start to be friends off the field as much as you play together on the field, because it can be a lifetime experience. But anyway, Stewie was the president of, I think, Port Hunter at the time. He got involved with the Griffins, but he was a wonderful thing. He loved rugby. He loved the young blokes coming up and trying to put it over him. He really loved that. He really loved that. I can't say that maybe some blokes did put it over him, but most of the time he would have a grin and say, yeah, try your best, son, and so forth. He played well into his 50s, which I thought was bloody stupid, because then the guy stopped at about 27. But Stewie, he just loved it, would not give it up. He did love a drink, so you've come to the right club. He did love a drink, but he was admired not just by his teammates, club mates, he was admired by the rugby community. He would play the hardest game going for, but he would be in amongst the other team, drinking, talking, having a great time, and so forth. Fortunately, when Stewie passed when he was 58, he had a heart attack. And I was instrumental in organising his funeral. His funeral, we decided, wouldn't work in a church. One, because Stuart wasn't religious, and two, we thought it appropriate we needed somewhere for a bit of room. So we actually asked the basketball stadium there at Broadmeadow, could we use that? Funny place for a funeral, but we did. And I'm glad we did, because we actually filled one half of that big basketball stadium. It was a massive funeral. In fact, I still think in my time, it's the biggest funeral I've attended here in Newcastle. So it wasn't Port Hunter blokes that filled it up. It wasn't the Griffin blokes that filled it up. It was the Newcastle rugby community and the people with his work that filled it up. So I couldn't think of anyone more appropriate. Anyway, I think actually in Newcastle now we actually have a trophy, Stuart Trench Shield Cup, something or other. It's in divisional. I think that's the thing as well. So Newcastle Rugby recognised him as well. But if Stuart was here tonight, probably now he's near 80, he probably still would have been out there running with you and so forth. I'm not sure his knees, shoulders and everything else would go wrong with him. But yeah, look, I think that's the testimony to the bloke that he was the most liked bloke in Newcastle Rugby. And you're playing for his honour on Friday night. I don't think he'd be too upset if you didn't win the game. We'd hope that you would. He's playing Hamilton, I think, aren't you? Yeah, well, we got one for you. But as long as you're playing in the right spirit and you shake hands with the opposition before and you shake hands with them after. That's what Stewie would want. But yeah, honestly, he was probably the best bloke I ever knew, and as I said, he was my friend up until the day he passed. He did have, I'll give you an example of how much a good friend he was, I was playing, we had a Goldnolly side later in our life, of course, and I went up to Signal, well, our club went up to Signal, and it was called the 400 Stuff Seagulls, and Signal didn't have enough players, so I silly said, oh, I'll play for Signal just so we can get a game going. So I ended up packing down against Trevor and Stuart, who were my two front row partners, and I got the best bloody uppercut that I have ever got in my life in a game of Goldnollies. Honestly, my head rocked back, and I said, "What the hell did you do that for, Stuart?" He said, "I've always wanted to." And seriously, that was Stuart. And to give you an idea, as I said, he liked to drink. He loved a Guinness. He loved a red wine. I don't think there was anything he didn't love. But at the time of his parting, people said, "Oh, it might have been time for Stu to go." I said, "No, it wasn't," because 1,726 bottles of wine he had underneath the house at the time of his party, including some Grangers. And I think from the day he died to the day of his funeral, another 6 dozen arrived that he had ordered again. So he wasn't short of it. Could drink. So yeah, play for him with pride. Toddy Trench is his son. I think most of you probably know Toddy from the pub. If you don't, but you should know him because he is a spitting image of the character of Stuart. Always slack. But we decided to spread appropriately Stuart's ashes on an oval, and I'll tell you where they are from where the dressing shed is. They're on about the 25 on the southern side. So as you go out that 25 there, that's about where Stuart's ashes are. So you will be running over the poor bugger. Run over him for me, will you? Tell him to just bloody punch over. But yeah, I'm proud to see you here, boys. Make your own destiny. Just make your own history. And I know it's fun. I think this is the best thing going, social force. I think enjoy the social force. Great to win. I know you haven't done it yet, but just shake hands and have a good time. Anyway, that's it, fellas.